hope you are sitting comfy spot somewhere with a wee beverage to keep you hydrated and your brain is ready to engage. I'm Alice Sharp, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm a teacher, an educator, conference speaker, and an author of a continuous professional development programme called Adventures with Alice. Throughout this series, we're exploring the magic of play-based learning in the early years. We're turning a lens on how this approach supports the development of key skills for our children and, of course, our staff too. I'll be talking to a number of educational experts as we aim to inspire you all every day for your work and to unlock the potential for learning in our lovely sector. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce two fabulous ladies. Liz Ludden and Sue Egersdorff are today's guests. Can you imagine it, guys? Hello, ladies. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
Wow, my goodness, this intergenerational learning seems to have huge impact on all of the learning, not just on early years, but on any generation that's involved, so staff and the older people that are involved in it as well. If I was considering looking at this in my setting, in my community, what could you suggest, guys? I mean, I'm thinking about some of the things you've said, and even taking my own two children. One of my children went to a childminder early on, and the other one spent a lot of time with their grandparents. And my husband and I always say that the one thing we notice about the two of them are the child that spent more time with their grandparents has a much richer vocabulary than the other one. Now, that might have lots of reasons, but we honestly think it came from that. So you've convinced me that I want to run away and do this everywhere, and every school should shut down and let's set up all of these everywhere in the communities. But can you suggest, how could I go about, where would I start if I'm doing that?
I think start with what you know. So start with the community that you're in and reach out. It has to be with a partner that understands. So we've been really, really lucky that we've got a partnership agreement with Belong, whereby they understand. They have to know that, and we say all the time that the nursery is much more important. But and they won't thank us for saying that. But yeah, start with what you know. Start with your community and find a partner that understands what you're trying to achieve and that you have the same vision. So it's not just taking them at Christmas. So we've had visitors and we've seen it before where people have come to sing and then at the end they say, and what are we giving? What are you getting here? And they've said, well, the last care home gave us a box of chocolates. So it's not about that, we're not saying don't do that, because for the older people, they love it. For children, they love it. It's a chance to perform. But really go deeper than that and go back to your relationships and understand what you can both gain for it, because the impact on the children is unbelievable. It's absolutely phenomenal. In terms of language development, in terms of social skills, in terms of problem solving, resilience, just these moments that, unless you've got, as a member of staff, having the opportunity to take a step back and not be the educator, but be the onlooker and being on the peripheral of that, really helps you to understand and gain a deeper knowledge of that child's learning and what their next steps are.
And I suppose the way you're saying that there, Liz, about the community that you're in, it would be very similar to if we've all heard it said that you can't take the practice of Reggio Emilia in Italy and completely and utterly copy it in a community in the UK, because it's not relevant to the community that you're in. And I guess what you're talking about, and I'll throw this out, that yours is in Chester, but if I said, right, can you come and partner and open one up in Scotland, it would be it wouldn't all look the same as what I'm trying to pick apart here. There isn't a model school that you can set up because it has to fit around the community. Would I be right?
Yeah. I mean, our Born for Life group, as I say, that they're in Uist in a circus tent. A circus tent. You work with what you've got and what your community, with other people who are visiting an allotment every week. I think they started off doing an hour a week, and now they're virtually in there 5 days a week with their older community. So it doesn't have to be a care home. Yesterday in Liverpool, we had a dancing group with grandparents and older relatives in our other nursery. So we're in a very fortunate position because we are fully integrated, but you can do it without being fully integrated. One of our next projects is the older people are going into a school, which has a forest school, and that they're going to be working alongside that, taking ownership of a patch of land that has been quite neglected over the years. So, there are opportunities out there. You just need to find them and be committed, because in the past, myself, I've been guilty of going and building a relationship with all good intentions with a care home. But if it was Wednesday and if it was raining and a member of staff had phoned in sick, we'd say, oh, well, we can't go today. And the same with the care home. They'd say, well, we've got someone else coming in today, or we've got a singer in this afternoon, so don't come. And it sort of became very ad hoc. But actually what we forgot was that there are people there, and that Bill might have been waiting for the children, or the children might have been wanting to go because they'd started a conversation and they wanted to finish that conversation, or they wanted to show someone something. So if you're going to do it, you have to be consistent, and it does take commitment. So you have to do it, and you have to be there for the long run. You can't just dip in and out, because these are people. It's not just to tick a box with your Ofsted inspector, or tick a box, that on your FIP, I've done that, and move on. These are relationships.
And I guess that's not fair on anybody involved if there's no continuity of care and learning happening, the same as it would be in a nursery, really, isn't it? And because I'm thinking, on a Saturday, if I come into the studios where I'm sitting, Chinese school happens in the building opposite me, and so I am not being over dramatic, but there is at least 1,000 of people, from tiny babies right up to grandparents who come to Chinese school together, and the chat and the noise and the vibrancy, and it, like, I throw all the windows open and the doors open on a Saturday if I'm in here writing or anything like that, because I just want it to embrace me. So that feeling of togetherness that you get, I'm wondering about the key benefits, I guess, not just for the older generation who are involved and the children who are involved, but their extended family who then come to see their parents, who have stories to tell them about the experiences they're sharing. What do you see from the kind of wider family, guys?
What we're seeing is this sense of a family growing. So it's almost like the onion rings. It started with the child, and then it's kind of extending outwards. But what you actually see is new connections. You can't control it all. So you have to be happy to just let it roll. So if a particular family makes a friendship with a particular older couple or older person, you let that go its own way, as it would in any other neighborhood. So it's like any other kind of human-centered design. It finds its own way, and people find their own way. And I think there's something about, to add to what Liz said, about just keeping it simple, that actually go into the care home and have a grown-up conversation with the manager of the care home about what she or he wants from this relationship. Have those grown-up leadership conversations that say, what are your issues that our children could help you solve, and vice versa. So that the care home is aware that you are trying to improve children's language, their social skills. Let's work on it together. And from the other perspective, we're helping the people perhaps living with dementia to have a richer life and to have things to look forward to. So I think having that leadership time together to say, why are you both doing it, before you actually even embark on bringing children and older people together, because you have to be able to articulate the difference it's making. And we work very simply, in a very simple way, from Freudian principles, because they work beautifully for children and older people. So time, giving people time, being playful, and engaging with nature. That's basically Freudian. And that applies to all of us, whatever age. So that's a really easy thing for the care home to take on board. And we also use high scope principles about learning experiences, which again can be easily translated into language for the care home. So you start to develop a shared professional language across professional kind of boundaries. That means you're all on the same page. And when you're on the same page, whoosh, you're off. You've done it then, because you're all thinking about the same things. You know, you're all together then, all working towards the same goals and impact.
And I know from talking to colleagues who work in the health service and the health industry, recruiting for staff to work with the older generations, the maturer part of our communities, is getting increasingly more difficult. You know, and I've almost heard somebody saying, how do we make caring for the elderly sexy? And, you know, and so that people want to do it and, you know, apply and go through the qualifications and stay in that sector. But what you're describing to me is, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I hope there's one of them near me when I'm in that kind of bracket, because I would love to be doing that, you know, and I hope that it's not just because I've spent my whole career in early years, but it just seems to be so joyful, I think, is the only word I can think of. You know, one of you said earlier on about nonsense and mischief, or naughtiness, I think is the word. You know, like, I absolutely love to see children engaged in nonsense and mischief. You know, I went to a school recently in the States, and there was no nonsense and mischief going on. It was just really calm, which is maybe not a bad thing, but I just thought, you know, I wish there could be a bit of something going on. And from being around older, maturer people in their 80s, they still want that. They still need joy in their lives. And, you know, can you, Liz or Sue, tell me some of the joyful situations you've witnessed? You know, tell me more about what these older generations are bringing in a joyful way to your children.
You see the smile on both of our faces, because
how long have you got?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the things that we do, we have a film night, and that, as Sue says, you know, keep it really simple. So at Christmas we watched The Snowman, and at the end of it we had some they were like pom-pom balls, snowballs, and we had a snowball fight, and one of our friends who is 98 stood up and absolutely lobbed the snowball across the room with such power, and then absolutely just went into hysterics because it hit one of the children on the head and bounced off, and they were throwing it back. And, you know, when you think about physical development, or you think about you know, all these things, all these goals that we're trying to achieve, that was really, really joyful. And there are just so many.
We had another one at a stay and play session where all the children and the older people were playing together, and one of our toddlers actually stole somebody's stick. And this was Chris's stick, who had never walked without his stick for 5 years. They hid it, and Chris stood up and walked across the room to try and chase them. And the carers couldn't believe it, because he'd never walked without his stick for many years.
Wow.
And so now the children always take his stick, and because they know it'll make him stand up. So from the care perspective, in that care, you know, the carers are recording massive progress for Chris. And the children have initiated that for him. So the children are actually leading his well-being, which is incredible when you think about it.
Huge. And I guess because we talk about that in our sector all the time, isn't it, challenging our children, and sometimes the older generation are just written off, and you know, that's one of the things I think that we need to be really, really careful of as a society, that we just don't think, right, okay, well, they're, you know, that's them had their life now. As you said earlier on, they've still got a huge amount to give, and you know, I've just written down on my bit of paper here. I'm going to try and write a joy audit. You know, and let's not audit all this stuff, the rubbish that we audit. Let's audit the joy. That would be amazing. You know, I want to lob a pom pom. And you made me think. There's a lovely Icelandic band called Sigur Rós, and to one of their songs, I can't remember which one. There's a beautiful black and white movie of older generation playing, you know, and I mean they do eventually put a bit of lit paper or something through a letterbox. I'm not suggesting that we endorse that, but they jump in puddles and they push each other and they shove each other, and you know, it's just a beautiful film. And again, you're painting that picture in my mind, guys, of what your children and families are having access to, and that just needs to be, it's certainly at the older end of, well, every end of life, joy should be our ultimate aim, happiness and joy.
I mean, it just is so joyful every day that we spend there. It is joyful. One of our older friends taught us some Glaswegian
tenement songs,
which were a little bit naughty, and so. But even just, we were talking this morning about some of the way that the older people interact with the children, and how it can bring them out of themselves. So one of our older friends, every time he comes in, he shouts ho ho ho, and so then the children respond back with ho ho ho, and you know, sometimes that you think, do we really want them all shouting ho 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 and getting higher and higher? But yes, you know, we do, because that's their interaction. That's the way that he interacts with them. So,
well, yesterday we had a pramble, which is one of our older residents was a rambler. So we now mix the prams and the rambling together, and we have prambles. So it started with 3 or 4 going out, just a double buggy and a couple of older people. There were 28 people roughly on the pramble yesterday. We've just bought a 6-seater pram, which is causing a big stir in Chester. So it stopped the traffic, because there were, you know, you would look, wouldn't you, at this strange collection of very frail people, babies, a big pram, all walking along the side of a canal. And if you'd have said to me, you know, people living with dementia pushing a pram alongside a canal, I'd be going, risk, 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 you know, red alert. How can you do this? And you can do anything so long as it's properly supervised and planned. And it is just purely joyful. So we then ended that with a race in the car park between the Invercars and our new pram, up and down the car park, and the Invercars actually won. So, but you can imagine the joy in that. We were just laughing so much we were almost crying.
You've made me want to run away now and write a picture book about a pramble. I think that would be an amazing picture book to be sharing with children. Yeah. Families. That would be fab. Now, just before we finish this week conversation, I want to pick up, because you talked about, or you have spoken about, you've done your research, and it's not just a ticky box, and you mentioned Froebelian principles and the high scope kind of techniques and methods that you engage. How important do you feel that has actually been, that you are basing this very different model of practice on something that is inherently what you have believed for, Sue, you said earlier on, over 40 years?
I think that has been the basis of, as a small charity, obviously we've had to look for funding. So we have to be very serious about what we're doing. So we have engaged quite a lot of higher education universities in terms of action research. So it's an inquiry-based model.
Okay.
We want to see what works and what doesn't. But you have to have a core set of beliefs. And I think what we believe in all our practice, whether that be primary practice, secondary school practice, or practice with anybody, any other group, is that, you know, Froebel is very human-centered, and it is applicable to any age, as is high scope, as is many of the early years approaches. Whichever one you want to choose is adaptive to any age group. And what we're finding is, that work really fits well into any other vulnerable group, and older people particularly are a vulnerable group. So working with people living with dementia, some of that Freubelian, any of our approaches in early years really work well for them, because they're based on some very simple things about how we behave as humans. So why do we complicate it by having to have separate kind of, you know, design features for different ages? We're all human. We're just at a different stage of being human.
I can't wait to see your policy on preambles.
Oh, well, there you go.
The preamble policy will be an amazing read, I think, ladies. So I think what I'm taking away from this little conversation is really important to have a strong sense of your value base to build this kind of idea upon, and simplicity is key.
And just be clear why you are doing it, not to just do something nice and make you feel great. It's about having impact on children's learning and their progress, and equally being respectful of the progress needed for older people. So thinking about the older people as well as the children.
But it does make you feel great.
Yeah, it does. And you do laugh your socks off every day.
That's a brilliant way to end. Let's all be joyful and laugh our socks off.
Yeah.
So I would love to say a huge thank you to our guests for joining us today and providing us with such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alice Sharp, and the amazing Liz Ludden and fabulous Sue Egersdorff. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. It has just been joyous. I think that's the word for today. If you've been inspired by our conversations today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content. Oh my goodness me. There are trillions of ideas for your settings and Pinterest boards to shop resources relevant to the topics that's been discussed today and throughout our podcast episodes.